Live. Hello and welcome yet again. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. Here we are with another expert panel discussion. An incredible array of cigar industry icons joining us today to discuss one of the hottest topics in cigars right now. After Habanos SA announced that it was going to increase the prices of Cuban cigars worldwide as part of sort of a new global pricing strategy and standard, a whole discussion erupted amongst the cigar-loving community, and rightfully so, but not purely about the prices of Cuban cigars. But we want to discuss today the general raise and rise of cigar prices globally. What's happening, the whys and hows, all the ins and outs, and some sneak peeks behind the curtains of the cigar industry with an array of gentlemen and hopefully many ladies watching us as well, that I not only tremendously respect. All of them have been part of the Light 'em Up family and community for the longest time. And so without further ado, I'm delighted and honored to welcome with me today, one and only George Brightman. Hello, George. Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Also with us is Javier Blanco, our ambassador from Spain and part of the Cigar Journal family, of course, and also part of our Light 'em Up family. Hello, Javier.
Hello, Reitner. Nice to be here again.
Next up, let's go high up north. Carl from the Stogie Lads, here with us today, joining us from icy cold Sweden. Carl, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us here. This is amazing, standing on the shoulder of some giants, as I see. But it's great to be here, and great to see you as always, Reinhard.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carl, for joining us. I see Aaron Sigmund. Sig, lingering around somewhere the lounge. Welcome back. It's been a few weeks. Good to see you, Sig. And as always, in pristine condition, looking fresh with a proper cigar in his hand.
Dude, well, I figured we were going to talk a lot about Cohiba, so I lit up a vintage Siglo too. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a while. I thought I was kind of banned from the show last time. George said too many bad words and I got blamed. So fuck him. That's what I'm saying. No, that's not nice, but true, actually. So yes, thank you for having me back. I appreciate it.
That's a fucking lie.
That is not. Don't. And I'm going to wash your mouth out next time I see you. Poor Rhino. He's just like, what the fuck? All right, moving on.
Well, at least, you know, we knew it's going to be a somewhat controversial show, but there we are, jumping right in the thick of it. And
you got a couple of socialists, you got a couple of communists, George is somewhere between those two. You got me, who's definitely representing the other side. So you'll have controversy. What can I say?
Well, it's fabulous to have different opinions here represented and a lot of things to talk about. Obviously, as always, you know, Light 'em Up, you know me well. Our platform is about unity, bringing the community together and discussing things in a very candid, generous, heartfelt way, but with all different opinions. And I also want to point out, this is not a discussion primarily or purely about Cuban cigars, because that's probably what certain people thought, especially in light of the news of the most current weeks. But we have seen cigar price rises all across the board with Cuban and non-Cuban cigars, all different origins, various companies. But before we go into all that, what would Light 'em Up be without the professor, Jose Blanco, here with us today? Whoop, whoop. Get your pontons out. Here is Jose. Thank you for joining us, brother.
He's going to be the Phantom. Jose
Jose.
is going to be like the.
It also wouldn't be light him up with Jose if he weren't on mute or, you know.
He's in silence for the first time in his life.
I know. No, I'm sorry. No, I want
That's
to.
funny.
No, what I was going to say, it's great to be on the panel and to hear the odd couple today, Sig and George Brightman at it. It's going to be a great show. There's a lot of talent on the show. There's somebody else that probably will pop up later on that's kind of incognito, but everybody who knows his probably his email knows he's hearing. But let's get on with the show, and it's going to be a great show. A lot of talent on the board tonight, young and old.
Well, Jose, why don't we just start with you, and probably you can give us a little bit of an introduction to this massive topic at hand, and give us a little bit of an overview of what happened over those past couple of weeks. Why do you see this bubbling up right now, and what are some of the sort of behind the scenes insights that you can share with us as to the hows and whys of this whole topic?
Okay, to talk about this, we have to do a little bit of history. When Habanos decides, when Cita and Seta get together and buy 49% of the distribution, it was two cigar companies that bought it. When Cita and Seta want to get out of it and they sell it to Imperial, it was a cigar group that bought it. But what happens? We all know it's a investment group out of Hong Kong that had bought it. They're not tobacco people. They could be smokers, but one thing is to be a smoker and one thing is to be tobacco, like the Merafels, like the Fuente, like the Padrones, like the Perdomos, like the Ping, that have that inside. This group doesn't have that there. So what do they do? What have they seen? That for the last 2 years, and anybody who's been in Europe, and I've been traveling Europe the last 2 years, you see everybody from the Far East going out to every store, buying every Cohiba, buying every Monte Cristo, buying every regional, buying everything that's out there at whatever the price was, and bringing it back to Hong Kong, Macau, Singapore, Beijing, wherever it was in the secondary market. Things that were 50 euros in Europe were 120, 130, 140. So what did these guys, you got to look at as not as a, you got to look at it as business said, well, why don't we just jack up the prices, make it a fair, even out game for everybody, and see what happens? Like, we already know that Cohibas, Behikis were being sold 150, 175, 200. Now there's people telling me it's 300. And now that they put the price out for the Behiki 55 at 300, there's people that have told me yesterday and today that if they get some, they will be able to sell them at $500. The other thing is, and then George, I know, can elaborate on this, and Javier and the other part of the panel. What a lot of people are forgetting is that a lot of these regionals, limited edition and expensive cigars were not bought to smoke. A lot of people bought them as an investment. And if you bought Cohibas when they came out, and all of a sudden you see the prices of it, and if you have 15, 16 and go all the way down, the prices come up. So this is what I've seen. I just came back from 2-week Germany. Anybody saw me? I saw the La Casa del Habano in Dusseldorf, 70% empty. The one in Munich maybe had 20%. The one in Nuremberg was totally out of product. And everywhere I went, Frankfurt, Stuttgart, Kassel, Hamburg, Munich, Dusseldorf, everywhere there was a lack of product. People are pissed off because, first of all, of the shortage. Second, because of the quality. And third, but this crazy price. Is it going to affect them? I think so. Are people still going to buy the high-end stuff? Absolutely. They can put them at $500, and at $500, people will buy them because a lot of people are doing it as an investment. That's my 2 cents up till now.
Yeah, I would like to bring you in to share some of your perspective in your opening statement, and maybe you want to reflect a bit on what Jose just said, and how do you see the situation in Spain at the moment?
Well, I agree that the starting point of all of this is, of course, this traveling Habanos from the European market, not only from Spain, but from all the European markets to Hong Kong. But if you look at the prices of the cigars this year and last year, as you have said in your introduction, all the cigars are rising their prices. All the cigars, because we are in an economic cycle that everything is all the prices are rising a lot. Not only in tobacco, in everything, and of course the providers of the industry. And I agree with Jose that these people that have bought Habanos now, they has nothing to do with tobacco because they are investors. They only have put the money in a business that they think is very good. But in the other hand, I think that Habanos had a lack in the super luxury segment. I mean, Davidoff, for example, Davidoff have royal release cigars that are in Spain. The price are between 80 and 100 euros per stick, and Habanos had nothing of this kind, and they know that no matter the price, because there's a huge demand of Cohiba over all the brands. I think Cohiba is the most demanded worldwide. So we are in a free market, and I find it's logical that Habanos put this Cohiba and Trinidad too into this super luxury segment, because they know that there's a lot of people that can afford it and they are going to pay that money for the cigars. The situation now in Spain is the estancos, the retailers, they are empty. There's very little amount of Habanos, but all other brands are breaking the stock too, because and we think we talk about this, Jose, 1 month ago, about the difficulty of the forecasting of sales in the industry. That's the very point here, because you make the forecast for 2 or 3 years. You are trying to guess what are your sales going to be in 3 years. So you cannot produce more than that. And the demand in these 2 years has been crazy, and not only in the United States. And the United States has been crazy, more crazy even. And this is the free market. So I think it's the step that they have done is, I found it logical. And of course, it's going to give chances to other brands too, at least here in Spain.
George, we live in certainly most challenging times, not particularly in regards to the premium cigar world, but in general. And as Javier rightfully said, all the supply chains are under duress currently. We see issues with the most basic things of everyday life that always taken for granted now aren't for granted anymore. With everything that's happening through and after the pandemic, the current crisis and the war in Ukraine, the tremendous spike in cigar demand, both in the US and internationally, is this sort of the perfect storm, or are we just bubbling up here into an incredible new era of cigar enjoyment, or what's happening? And what I'm interested in as well is, do you share Jose's perspective that most of these cigars that have seen those tremendous price increases are actually never smoked, but end up in a collector's humidor stashed away somewhere in a country far away?
Okay. First, I want to say, even thanks for including me in this. Second, I want to ask, when Jose said at the end of his comments, what he said was there was a lot of inventory in Germany, but I think he meant the opposite. He thought there was a lot of empty shelves, that there's no inventory, just like we're talking about in Spain, and in the UK and France and all the other traditional markets where you would normally see plenty of high-end Habanos on sale. Am I right about that, Jose?
George, yes, correct. You know, at my age, you know, sometimes I don't know what I'm saying. No, it's empty. It was empty. And Switzerland, the same thing. Germany, the same thing. And Javier, the same thing could talk about Spain. I'm sorry about that.
So, no, that's good. But I just wanted to clarify that so we weren't misleading anybody in thinking that there were market dichotomies, you know, the differing conditions. I think it's pretty much universal. So my feeling about this is that I think we're looking at three factors coming together. The first is the rise of wealthy people with stupid money and less sense. So, and that also leads to collecting and hoarding, because stupid people with money always need trophies. And by the way, God bless stupid people with money. You know, they keep the luxury business afloat. It's fantastic. There's nothing wrong with that, because occasionally they stumble across somebody with taste who guides them about where to spend that stupid money. But we have been in an era where there is more and more, you know, we all know about the wealth gap, so to speak. So there's more and more uber wealthy, and there's more and more tech people. And don't forget, crypto has created a whole bunch of people who have, you know, the equivalent of monopoly money. Whether or not it's going to last, whether they're going to have it to spend next year or not. The thing is, if you got crypto and you made a bunch of big gains, and you know, you're one of these guys that thinks you're smarter than the average bear, you may decide that you want to go out and buy, you know, wine and cigars, and maybe even something as, you know, wildly inappropriate as cars or whatever, you know, and think that that's going to be your hedge. We've all listened to, you know, lifestyle coaches say, well, wine's been a better investment over the last 30 years than the New York Stock Exchange, and blah, 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 which is all great if you're smart enough to know that the real pleasure of having a wine cellar is going down into it and drinking. And the same is true of having a well-stocked humidor. You can have cigars. If you buy cigars with the idea that they are age-worthy and that they're going to improve your life later on, and if some of them turn out to have been a good investment, it may be hard to resist the idea of saying, I can sell this one box and pay for 5 more. So, you know, you can hardly blame people who fall prey to the idea that you should go out and buy things of that nature as a hedge, and that you can, you know, make these crazy gains. Most people don't have the kind of foresight that a few friends of ours, Sig, you and I both know several people who decided to be well ahead of this game, and they're making significant money on a secondary market. But the vast majority of consumers won't do that. So the rise of money, of easy money and wealth, the rise of a class of people who are coaching you how to spend that money, whether responsibly or irresponsibly, that's actually moot. The other factor to be aware of, and Jose, you have been watching it, but maybe from a different vantage point for quite some time, which is Habanos has been trying steadily over the last 25 years about ways and means to increase their share of the pie that these cigars are getting from consumers. So, secondary traders, guys that are traveling around buying inventory here and taking it there. I mean, how many times have you been in Havana and you've watched these guys that are going around and loading up suitcases and then, bribing somebody at the airport to get them out and taking them back? Gray market cigars are more popular now than they ever have been. But Habanos has always looked at the amount of money that these cigars have brought outside the exchange price that they're getting paid for them by their partners around the world, or by consumers in La Habana or all across the island. So they're no different than whiskey producers right now who are looking at Scotch and bourbon and rye prices tripling and quadrupling for certain things on the secondary market, legal or illegal, it doesn't matter. And they're going, oh, wait a minute, no, we need some of that, and they up their prices. So something that was very reasonable at $30 for a 750 ml is now all of a sudden 130. Right? And people are lining up to buy it, which is, that's their own problem. But when something is that in demand, that limited in production and availability, and it has become the coin of the realm, so to speak. In other words, it's a trophy to have on your bar, in your humidor, to show off to your friends. It's inevitable that because of competition for limited supply, the prices are going to get stupid. Now, the great thing about all of this happening, in other words, that a bunch of guys that have no idea about how to run something as complex and sophisticated as Habanos and the distribution of Cuban cigars across the world market, those guys are going to take a haircut eventually. But here's the thing. The people that are talking about buying cigars for $150 and $200 and $300 right now and thinking that they're going to sell them for a gain in profit, man, they're like the last fools in the blockchain con job, right? In other words, they're the ones that are going to go, oh, I put my life savings in this and now I have nothing. Woe is me. Well, you didn't read the fucking fine print. If you're the last guy into the marketplace and buying, at ridiculously inflated prices, you have no one to blame but yourself for the results. Now, in the case of many other cigars, which people may be acquiring for purposes of turning at a later date after they had dramatically improved, you always have the comfort that you've got a humidor filled with great inventory. But for guys that are buying $300 Habanos cigars right now, I got news for you. You may end up very sorry with what's in your humidor based on issues about tobacco, the speed of fermentation, quality control, all these other. And I'm not talking about. I'm not being a typical American cigar consumer going, oh, Cubans are no good anymore. That's bullshit. We know that they do make some extraordinary cigars, but it's a smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller percentage. And there's an ever-growing number of uber wealthy people competing for them. So the likelihood that some schmuck is going to find a good box in a duty-free spot as he's traveling on vacation or something is a joke. Who does that benefit? Number one, counterfeiters and scam artists. Too bad about that, but it's a fact of life. Number two, who does it benefit? The greatest cigar manufacturers in the world right now, like the Fuentes and like the Padrones, even Plasencia. Let's talk about the Torrents in Mexico, who are making great cigars that nobody's recognizing. The Olivas. The tobacco men everywhere are going to be, let's say, I don't want to say assaulted, but they're going to be flooded with requests for their top quality product, because all over the world, people are like, okay, well, I really want to spend $300 or $400 on a Cohiba or a Bahique, but I can't. So what do I have? Let me buy that Opus. Let me buy that Family Reserve. Certain things that will fit. And Davidoff wisely recognized that and made some beautiful cigars. Now, before I climb down off my soapbox and turn it over to Sigmund, who's probably going to say, no, that's not right. Let's be clear about one thing: whether demand is going to match. In other words, there's no question that people are going to continue to want to buy these super high priced Cubans. But the beauty, what will hopefully happen for non-Cuban producers is that they expand their reach, they expand their distribution, and build their network of fans, of appreciation, without necessarily having to aggressively raise their prices. And I want to throw in one reminder for everybody, and Jose, I know you'll back me up on this. The single best outcome of the boom of the 90s is that the flood of money that came from the rapid rise in cigar prices eventually ended up reaching the farmers, who ended up providing better raw material, which meant that the great tobacco men could produce incredible blends and remarkable accomplishments. And the entire cigar smoking world are the beneficiaries of that. So let's hope that in some ways that same factor is a follow-on effect of price increases across the board right now. End of sermon.
May I say something about this stupid money, George?
Yes, please.
Yeah, for those like me that have intelligent but little money, I'm smoking a CAO, $5, that delivers nice aroma, nice taste, and I'm enjoying the cigar very much here with you. So I think that stupid money at the end pays the rollers, pays the growers, pays everyone. So that's going to go into the benefit of the industry, of course. And I don't care what they do with the cigars. I don't care if they pay 100 or 200 or 300 for a cigar. It's not my business. I don't mind. I wish there were more people like this, but not only buying Cohibas or Davidoff, but buying everything, yeah. Because that would be in the benefit of the industry. And as Jose always says, that will make us be better. There will be more tobacco with more quality, more options for every pocket. That I mean, every pocket. So
every price range.
Yeah, this is the market at the end. It's a market. There's a stupid guy that wants to pay, I don't know, 1,000 euros for a Cohiba. Okay, here you are, your Cohiba. Do whatever you want with it. No, it's not my business. So I'm not worried about this. I'm not worried at all.
Good.
George, many thanks for your wonderful insights. Just in the meantime, I'm absolutely overwhelmed and super happy that so many people are joining us today, whether it's here via Zoom at the lounge or watching on Facebook, all across the board, from cigar manufacturers, other media professionals, enthusiastic consumers. Great to see all the stakeholders of the cigar industry and ecosystem here with us. And please put your questions, your comments, and all your thoughts underneath the live stream or here into the comments via Zoom, and we'd love to hear your perspectives and questions. Now, Aaron,
competing points of view.
Aaron, over to you. I'm sure you've got.
Oh, thank you. Much to Jose's surprise and chagrin, I only disagree with about 25% of what George said, which is impressive, quite honestly.
Yeah, low. That's a good odds.
It's great odds. It's actually, I was nodding in agreement in regards to much of it, but not all of it. By the way, Jeremiah, I'm sorry to see you're so underdressed. It's always unfortunate. When we talk about luxury, here's a man who strolls into a Zoom meeting with a Stefano Ricci suit. What's that running these days? You want to take the temperature of people who spend on luxury. There's our man right there. Poster child. Take a screenshot right now.
I apologize, Aaron. I'm underdressed because I'm sitting at the airport in the Dominican Republic, and it's about 95 degrees. So I decided not to put the tie on today. But if I had
You
known
look hot,
that you were going to,
are hot.
if I had known that you were speaking so eloquently, I would have put two ties on today.
So I'm going to say there are two things I want to point out. One is, yes, it's true. I do a lot of stuff in and around cigars, but I also work within a lot of different luxury categories. So I'm going to speak about from a 50,000 foot view as opposed to just specifically about cigars. But before I do that, there's a qualifier to all this. Many people commented before we started this Zoom and this Facebook, and hello to everybody, that cigars are no longer an affordable luxury. I think that's really very erroneous. All things considered, relatively speaking, when you look at the totality of the world of luxury, cigars are still the most affordable luxury. There's some good bargain wines out there and some other things, but the days of going into a liquor store here in the States and getting a bottle of Pappy, Van Winkle 10 or 12, and for $75 or $65, and those days are long gone. And all things considered, cigars are still relatively affordable. Not to the stogie lads, because they're perpetual students in a socialist country. So they think everything should be free, just like their education. But for the real world, those of us who actually pay taxes and do things. But here's the thing, and this is really what it comes down to when it comes to the world of luxury. The new Habanos pricing strategy is absolutely unequivocally no different than what Hermes has done recently, Rolex has done over the last 5 years, Ferrari, Macallan Scotch, all these different categories within the sphere of luxury have done exactly the same type of pricing structure, especially Rolex. I sit on a board like this or a Zoom like this, and all the watch people are bitching and complaining about Rolex this and Rolex that. It's no different. It is a universal luxury industry strategy. And that's just c'est la vie. That's just really, truly the way it is. But there's also this notion that somehow this just all happens all at once. Now, going back to George and I. When George and I started at Davidoff, or I started at Davidoff and George was exiting in 1991, a special R in California, which has high taxes, not as high as England and some of the other places, but has high taxes, was $8.25. I actually looked it up today because I didn't know. Now it's $22.60. That's 3 times the price. Why did nobody kick and scream? Because it was very incremental. Every couple of years, they also didn't send out a press release saying, you're going to pay more, because obviously when you go to the store, you'll know it firsthand yourself. And to me, that's the interesting thing is everybody's complaining, whether it's Rolex or Habanos or, for those of you who are buying Ferraris, it's the exact same thing, or certain scotches for sure. And George alluded to that. It is spot on. But the fact of the matter is this is universal, but it's all in how you present it, right? So the fact that this cigar has gone up 3 times, but incrementally over this period, 30 years, so it's gone up basically a percentage every single year. And nobody said boo. Now, all of a sudden, it's like, oh my God, and it's true. Look, I've said a million different times, capitalists and communists make strange bedfellows. When you have the people in Cuba making these cigars now with Chinese partners who are essentially authoritarian communists, and then you're presenting a luxury good to the world, to connoisseurs and collectors, and as George has said many times, investors, you're going to have some conflicts, but it's not as conflicting as you really think if you look at the entire broad spectrum of luxury goods and all the different categories that fall within luxury goods. This is a very logical, natural progression, and it just kind of is a fait accompli. We can sit here and say it's unfair or it's wrong or it's this. It just is. And, there was an interesting interview not that long ago with the CEO of Rolex. People have complained they're not making enough watches and nobody can get the stainless steel models and on and on and on. And guess what? The CEO of Rolex gives no fucks about any of those complaints. And the head of Habanos also does not care about what we're about to say. It's just the reality of the world. Part of it, sure, is easy money, as George said it is, but I think it's just the natural progression of luxury goods as a general overarching category. And I just think that's just the way it is. It's just the reality of the marketplace that we're living in. And again, drilling down to where I originally started all this, which is if you really look at all things that fall within luxury, a lot easier to buy an Opus X or a Padron or even certain Cohibas than it is to buy a Chateau Margaux or any sort of Grand Cru or Premier Cru wine. And those are the next comparable things, comparable things. And then you go up from there, whether it's watches or something like that. It is still incredibly affordable and achievable to be a real cigar connoisseur and taste all sorts of cigars and just pick and choose wisely. But there is a fundamental difference. The investors, as George talked about, whether it be bourbon or whiskey or wine or cigars, these people are not going to smoke it. So they may very well look in their humidor and say, this is what I got. And, George was alluding, and this is where we disagreed. Oh, the fermentation was hurried on and on and on and on, the construction and the quality. They won't care because they're never going to really touch, feel, smell, look, listen, and really enjoy the senses. They bought it as an investment and they're going to hold it for as long as they can. And then they're going to move on to whatever the next thing is. And that's just the luxury world right now. And you can say the same thing about an Hermes Birkin bag or a Kelly bag. It just doesn't matter. It can be a Goyard, something or another. It falls into all these different things. Look at what Porsche has done over the last decade when it comes. At one point in time, a 911, especially an old one, was relatively attainable. You could actually fix it in your garage and you could race it on the weekends. That ship has sailed. So the complaints we have about cigars are the complaints that Porsche enthusiasts have about 911s. It's the complaints that watch collectors have about Rolex. It is across the board. And that's just a fact.
Sig, do you believe that the cigar world is only now starting to grasp and truly understand or move into that luxury world?
Well, I always think it was on the periphery, but I think somehow because we told ourselves for so long we're an affordable luxury, we somehow thought we were really immune to this all. And the fact of the matter is, we're not. It's still a business. And, you have to look at what your competitors are doing. Cartier and Audemars and Patek and all these people are looking at what Rolex does. Look at what Patek did last year. They discontinued one of the Nautilus in stainless steel, one of their most popular models, and just cut it off. The price, it didn't just skyrocket. It went well beyond our solar system. And so perhaps, but I have to think that whether it's some of the limited edition Opus X and Forbidden X, whether it's some of the limited edition Davidoffs, whether it's some of the limited edition Padrones or a lot of different cigars, I think people have clued in and keyed in on it. But as Javier was saying, you can still get a $5 CAO, and that's fine. You can't get. There is no entry-level Rolex anymore. Not really. There's no real entry-level Porsche. But when I was a kid, a 914 was attainable, really very easily, quite honestly. And George is old enough to remember the Porsches, at the war. He was at the factory for the first year tour. Not true, but oh no, that was Jose. I'm sorry. But it's. I don't know that we're catching up. I think it's always been there. Now it's in the forefront. Before it was in the background. And as George said, we've known many savvy collectors who really kind of clued in and said, hey, Davidoff and Dunhill aren't going to be making cigars in Cuba anymore. I'm going to buy a dozen boxes or 2 dozen boxes, whatever I can afford. I'm going to set them aside and see what happens. It's been omnipresent. It's just the cigar smokers you've been hanging out with. and really the conversations that are being had. I always think it's been there, always. I just think now it's in the forefront because the world was shocked by Habanos taking this particular pricing strategy. But again, going back to the Special R, this is a cigar that's gone up 3 times in price over the decades, and nobody said boo. It's always been there. It just, now we're keying in on it. So consumers are cluing in on it. I think manufacturers have always kind of had one foot in the door of that. I hope
Reinhard, can I add something to that?
You can't stop them even if you say no, so let them.
No, I'm asking permission from our host.
Well, that's very kind of you, but just say it already.
Look,
I think I love how well behaved you are in these sessions compared to Sig, at least.
It's true. I know why.
I'm trying to respect the forum, the format, and the host. I think it's really, really important that we all also, sort of as a corollary to my idea of the rise of more wealthy people, but let's say that it cannot be understated. There is a much younger group of people across the planet who have a big pile of discretionary income, which is almost unprecedented in the history of the world. And at the same time, there is a rise in social media, much like what we're participating in right now, which serves as a way to inform and educate or mislead the people who have this money. So where, it used to be that you had to get to a certain age and, stage in your life in terms of your job and your earning and everything else. And by that time you had developed a relationship with somebody who was a responsible, experienced, and well-informed vendor, whether it was your tobacconist, your vintner, your tailor, your shoemaker, all these things. You then had, not only did you have enough money to indulge yourself, but you had the wisdom and the connections to know where to go. People are reaching that stage much faster now because of this extraordinary dissemination of information. And, there's a desire to absorb it at the same time. So God bless, that's all great. And also developing at the same time with that is a flow of goods across borders that is unprecedented. So people are they're buying cars in Europe and bringing them here. They're buying cars in Cuba and taking them wherever they want to show off in museums or their private collections. People buy, they travel to buy wines and spirits at the source, and it's no different, of course, for cigars. So I think it's important that we note that goods and services are traveling in a way that they never had before. You have a much younger, very well-heeled class of people who have at their disposal a tremendous amount of knowledge. So it only stands to reason that there is increased demand and almost a competitive circumstance for acquiring these things that are trophies. And therefore, as a result of that, as a factory like Patek Philippe with limited man hours, limited skill, limited number of the highly skilled workers who produce these things, they're going to say, no, I don't want this guy at his bench making our least expensive watch. I want him at his bench making our most expensive watch. So it's, these things, I alluded to this before about Habanos's desires long before non-tobacco men, long before investors came along and seized control of Habanos as outsiders. They were greedy. They were looking at the amount of money that was being earned off island and saying, we need more of that. And that was the real motivation. Getting a higher dollar was the motivation for creating all of the brands that have emerged from the 90s on, which also includes all the limited editions, all the edition regionals. This class of goods was specifically created to dig deeper into the wallet of their consumer base.
Carl,
I return the floor to our host.
Carl, I'm very curious to hear your perspective on not only Sig's comments about your student life. We'll let that pass. But, what does affordable luxury mean to you?
I mean, affordable luxury, I'd say it's exactly what Aaron Sigmund talked about. I mean, I'm smoking a Dom Pepin Garcia Blue right now, and it's a cheap cigar, but it's super, super good. So it is true, right? I think a lot of people quickly jump to the conclusion that Cohiba is luxury, whereas the whole cigar, I mean, premium cigars as a whole is a luxury, right? But they're still very, very affordable. As you know, I'm a living proof of this. I mean, Sigmund likes to rip us, me and Ruben on the Stogie Lads. We're both perpetual students, but we can still afford cigars as much as we want to, I guess. So that's a really beautiful thing. But there are some other points I wanted to touch on with this, because there's been really good stuff being brought up here, right? I mean, first and foremost, Javier said something that's in theory very nice, and I believe to an extent, about the rollers and the farmers. You know, increased assets for Padron, for Fuente. I can trust that that's going to be reinvested. We already see that, Fuente is going into Nicaragua and stuff like that. I wish, though, that I had enough faith in Habanos to think that these prices are going to give the rollers a raise. I mean, the new Cohiba Limitada is $300 a stick. I don't know how much of a cut the El Laguito people there are getting of that cigar. So, you know, I guess I really wish more of that was reinvested into the production, because there's a lot of people working hard in Cuba to make these products for us. And I want to say I really agree with George. I mean, there's that thing about profiting on this consumable product, which at the end of the day, I mean, at least I hope every blender makes a cigar thinking there's going to be someone that smokes it and loves it. And there's a lot of people investing. I mean, we've been on Instagram approached by people with Chinese usernames that text us and say that they want to buy regionals from Sweden through us, so they can resell in Asia, and shot away that request every time, because I personally can't get myself to that level where I want to profit off someone that wants to smoke a cigar, because for me it goes against sort of my morals as to what I love about this product. So I mean, it's just a crazy situation where this is becoming this luxury product where you can invest in. But in some ways inevitable, right? I mean, Aaron Sigmund talked about this as well. Like, Cohibas have been the status symbol for so long. It feels almost crazy that it's taken this long for them to leave the segment of affordable at all for normal people. I mean, I said this on our podcast when this thing happened, that the Cohiba is now gone from a cigar that I'm actually ever thinking of smoking to something that's in another realm. It's the same thing as if I want to go and buy a new T-shirt. I'm not going to Balenciaga, even though I'm too rich of a student, as Sigmund says. I'm not buying my clothes there. And it's the same thing with Cohiba now. When I think I want to smoke a good Cuban cigar, it's not going to be viable. But another good point here, that because I see that you wanted to bring in the other part of cigars, which there's so much more than Cuba, right, Reinhard? I mean, you talked about that there's other segments, right? But when you scroll through Half Wheel, the early part of this year, they posted, it feels like a few times a week, X brand is increasing prices. And every time the reasoning behind it was inflation, right? Increased production costs. But the elephant in the room is that Cohiba or Habanos with Cohiba and Trinidad. I mean, they're not talking about inflation whatsoever. I mean, they're openly pinning the price of the Hong Kong market, right? So it's quite obvious that it's a completely different ballgame there. It's a completely different sort of price strategy, which it makes it a huge clear difference there. And another interesting thing with Habanos there, another great point Sig made, that it happened so suddenly, right? And that Manny said this, Jose Blanco's cousin, which is a really good point earlier before. Habanos did this super suddenly, like really quickly out of nowhere. There were no leaks even the new limitadas, we see leaks on forums and stuff a year before. This just happened like that. Just another indication of how strange this company is and how strangely it's being run and how much it's evolved since its new ownership, or at least partial ownership. The Sancho Panza non plus or non plus, however you want to pronounce it, that Petite Corona was discontinued officially years ago, but there are still boxes being made like from 2020. Usually they're slow, but paradoxically, I guess this communist country, when there was money to be made in this situation, they jumped on it faster than I've ever seen Habanos make any decision. So yeah, it's just super interesting to see. And Sweden is a very good sort of case study with this, because the shelves are restocked recently. Habanos Nordic, our distributor, got a shipment of Cubans in recently. But if you look online or in physical stores, I was around today in Stockholm, and Trinidad and Cohiba empty. So the companies are strategically choosing not to sell them. I guess they're holding on because the prices aren't official yet. Where we are seeing them is online. I think a lot of people, especially the Americans here, whoever has the day off today, midday in the US, other than George and Sig, those online stores have changed the prices quickly. I mean, they can do whatever they want, I guess, but the other countries here where Habanos Nordic, they need to go through legislations here, and it's going to be super interesting to see. I mean, countries like Portugal, you can only sell cigars by the box. That's going to be much interesting to see how, a lot of these different strategies come in. But here in Sweden, at least, the Trinidads and the Cohibas are not to be found. So yeah, it's completely different. What I hope, the only positive thing, my friend Ruben on our podcast said, what I hope happens from this is that some more non-Cuban options can come, because when we discuss here what we can go to when we don't smoke a Cohiba anymore, we don't have Padron whatsoever, which is a huge shame. We have Davidoff, which is sort of a viable option, I guess, but then there's some Fuentes. I've had to use, friends that travel to the DR like Manny here to bring home some good stuff, because there's a huge lack, and we are sort of cornered in that sense to I guess abide by these new prices, at least for now, and we'll see what happens. We'll see how long it is an affordable luxury. I might have to change my mind about being a student from now on. You let me know, Sig.
I will.
If I can say something, what I meant to say is not, of course, Cuba is a communist country, and what they should do is deliver all the profits between the workers of El Laguito. Of course, they should do that to be current. But what I meant to say is that Habanos, or the new investors or whoever, they are responsible of a company, and of course, a big part of those profits are going to be reinvest in the business to go and do it better. That's what I meant when I say that the end farmers and workers will have benefits. Of course, I didn't mean that they were going to give the money to the workers, which I really know that it's not going to happen. Of course, it's not going to happen. But if I can say something about luxury, I think that premium cigars are part of the luxury. It's not new. Is one thing that is for long. Davidoff is luxury. Arturo Fuente is luxury, and of course now Cohiba is super luxury. Yes, of course it's for people that have really big money. But eventually I am brand ambassador for Davidoff in Spain, and one day I was in a shop, and a customer came and asked me about Davidoff Oro Blanco, which is 530 euros here in Spain. Davidoff Oro Blanco I think is the most expensive cigar now in the markets. And he said, who in the world can pay 530 euros for a cigar? And I say, no, you're wrong. People that come to buy this doesn't buy one; they buy 10. And that's it. That's luxury.
Yeah.
And this is it. It's not compulsory to buy Coiba. It's not compulsory to buy Davidoff. For me, this is a very good chance for other producers that can make very good cigars, very good price, and cigars for all the pockets. Of course, luxury cigars, and for people like me that we have a very short budget for cigars, we have our options that are very nice too. I think I'm going to repeat it, but I think it's the market. The market is like this.
I would like to welcome another gentleman to our panel, and I'm delighted and honored to have Jorge Tapies with us, who can, in particular, I'm sure, share some of his experiences and his perspective, having spent plenty of time in Hong Kong recently. Jorge, welcome.
Thanks, Reinhard. And can you guys hear me okay?
¿Te ha aterrizado tarde el avión, Jorge? ¿Qué?
Sí.
¿No has sabido dónde aparcar el avión?
No tenía dónde parar el avión. Listen, sorry I'm a little late, but I think you guys are pretty much covering everything that we're seeing. I'm fortunate enough to be, or I guess unfortunate to be in Hong Kong and kind of saw this happen, for the last month or so before the news came out. I think Jose Blanco had it sort of from the get-go, right? I think Habanos, the decision for the shareholder, whom I know, was a no-brainer, right? I mean, they needed to find a way to close the price arbitrage that distributors all over the world were benefiting for the last several years. So, from a financial standpoint, doing that was a no-brainer, period. Now, from the point of view of the distributors, I think obviously we all know that PCC is going to be the one that's going to greatly benefit from the new change. I worry about the smaller. I'm in Panama at the moment, and I worry about distributors in Panama, Costa Rica, the Caribbean, that they did 90% of the business locally. 90% of the business was basically a re-export to Asia, and a marginal 10% was to supply the local market. So I think that's going to be very interesting to see what happens with those distributors over the next year or two. From the point of view of the retail for the consumer, I think, whoever was used to buying cigars in Hong Kong or London, I don't think it makes a big difference. For the average smoker in Spain or Latin America, I think this is a big wake-up call. But again, like I believe Sigmund was saying, this is just the reality of the luxury market. And if you see from like Goyard or Rolex, you can look at their corporate website and you see the prices there, right? The price is going to be the same, save any FX differences or taxes. You can publish the price, and that's what you pay for a Goyard bag in Argentina or in Hong Kong. It doesn't matter. It's the same price. So I think clearly this is where they're going. But and then one comment that somebody, I think Javier, made about whether there's going to be an infusion of capital as far as improving. I do not think so, and I have sources, part of the shareholder. I don't think there's any interest or appetite from the side of the shareholder to throw money at Cuba Tobacco to try to improve any of their processes so I think, the prices are where they are. I think that the big killer here is going to be inventory, right? And their ability to produce to supply the worldwide demand. I think we're still going to see now 90% of it all going to Asia via Hong Kong, especially China. And Reinhard, you saw the auction prices, what we're seeing now, it's insane, right? Just an auction 2 weeks ago in Hong Kong. And yes, granted, a lot of them are vintage cigars, but they're prices that 99% of the world will never be able to touch. And when you have collectors, I think Blanco said the same thing. It's an investment for them, right? For them buying 300-400 boxes, it's just another, term investment, and that's the way they see it. So, we're going to be competing against those buyers. So, especially for those big premium brands, it's going to be extremely hard to find them. And I think that's the end of it.
Jose, I would like to pose a question that Øystein, our dear friend in Norway, brought up via the Facebook chat, and I wanted to forward this question to you. He was curious whether the price increases are all down to world events like the pandemic, the war, shortages, or more cigar and agriculture specific. And are some just increasing their prices because the competition does so and they can get away with it? What's your perspective?
Yeah. I'm going to answer that, but I want to follow up a little bit on what Jorge said. When I brought up about these people that have been buying cigars, as many of you remember, I took a year off and I did a lot of consulting in Hong Kong, Thailand, Beijing, Shanghai, Hong Kong. And during all those years, I met a lot of people. And I know for a fact that a lot of people that were buying cigars were just putting them. And I'm glad that you brought up the auction, because I think it was Heiko, or I don't know if it was Gino, somebody sent me the list. And I was looking at the ridiculous prices of that. So there were people that bought boxes of cigars for, let's say, 250, 300 euros, that all of a sudden sold those boxes of cigar at the auction 10 times the original price. Even some of them went up to 15, 20 times. So we do have a certain amount of people that have been buying cigars and will continue to buy cigars. Now, Cohibas at $300, that's, the future will say, well, some people buy them and maybe get 400 in time, but it's not what I think it's what it was. But I think it was Sig or George who said that there's a lot of crazy money out there. Going to Oyston's question, look, if you look at the cost of living, and it doesn't matter in Dominican Republic, Honduras, Costa Rica, Mexico, inflation, the cost of medicine, the impact of the pandemic. To give you an example, when I was in Nicaragua, and that was not so long ago, 8, 9 years ago, a price of a pound of ligero was around $4.50, secos and visos, $3.50. Right now, visos and seco, $10.50 and $9.50. The rollers, especially in Nicaragua, that are a lot of them are leaving to the frontier, has impact. Anybody you talk to that is a manufacturer in Nicaragua will tell you the amount of rollers. There was even an article, I think it was Claudio, that represents the group of the Department of Commerce, that even had an article saying about the exodus of people living there, but also the cost of fertilizer. To give you an example, a container from Dominican Republic, let's say, to Europe, used to cost $8,000 or $9,000. That's around to $22,000 to $24,000 to $28,000 a container. The cost of wood, the cost of every single thing that you need to make cigars with has gone through the roof. Now, are there some companies, and I'm not going to talk about the Habanos things, because my opinion is that they did this as an investment group, not as a company that has tobacco, essential oils in their veins. Yes, some companies went up 5%, 10%, 15%. Some companies in Europe went up 30, 40, 50, 60%. But at the end of the day, I think all the price increases are justified. Maybe some of them went a bit above, but you cannot continue to have a company with inflation, gas prices, cost of food, cost of labor, cost of electricity, cost of fertilizer, cost of paying the rollers. The rollers have incrementally in the last 3 or 4 years, every year, price increase, price increase, price increase. Wages have to be increased. So that's what I could tell you about that. Everything has gone up, without a doubt.
Jose, in Spain, all the brands has risen their prices this year. All the brands, not only Habanos. Some of them 10%, 15% the price, but they didn't make so much noise, like of course Cohiba or Trinidad, because Trinidad has risen the price, or is going to rise the price 300%. Of course, that's crazy. But everything, every price, cigar prices in the space are going up this year. That because of the cost that you have said, that the cost of producing cigars are rising, and you have to pay that. You have to pay the rollers, you have to pay the tobacco, you have to pay everything. Logistics has been, the price of logistics has gone up a lot, and all those increments at the end goes to the consumer, of course, because it's logical, it's how it works. So that's one thing. So I mean, this is a part of the crisis of the pandemic, or a part of the demand, because as we talked the other day, you remember that when you make a forecast for for producing cigars, you are thinking on the market for the next 3 years. You are not thinking of the immediate market. You have to make a forecast in a long term, of course, because you have to grow the tobacco, you have to process the tobacco, you have to do everything, and it's normally for good cigars at least 2 years. So you have to guess what is going to happen in 3 or 4 years. And I think that nobody in the industry have made a good forecast for what is happening in this 2020 and 2021, that the demand of the cigars has grown so much. I think that in the United States, they are close to 500 million sticks in 2021. That's, you have to produce those cigars. And unfortunately, or I don't know, romantically saying, cigar production is not just putting the machine on, press the button and start producing. No, you need the process. So I think this is happening because it's logical. It is the cost, it is the demand, and prices are going up, and that's it.
George, speaking about the large numbers that we have seen over the last couple of years, and those tremendous importation numbers, in particular into the United States, we often discussed whether that's sustainable, what the future will hold. But one thing to stress there is also that primarily we're looking at importation numbers, so cigars that go from the manufacturing countries into the US, but that does not automatically translate into sales. So what happens if we see a gap there, or if suddenly some of the retailers realize, look, we're tremendously overstocked here, and we're just not seeing the same demand meeting what we have available? What's the outcome there? What are we looking at?
I'm gonna let George. George has a good opinion about that. I want to hear what George has to say, because I got my 2 cents on that, which I studied this. I mean, George is much older than me, but I'll let George go ahead.
Listen, one thing to say is we have a little bit of past history. When your numbers explode and quality doesn't keep up, a drop in consumer response is inevitable. But the difference between, let's call it the boomlet that has been occurring in the last, say, 5 or 6 years, and was lifted by demand, a surprising demand during the COVID era, where people are more at home. We have not seen an attendant drop in quality either of tobacco or construction. So the cigars that are part of this flood are not poor quality. They're not scamsters. They're not opportunists. They're not ill-advised non-tobacco people trying to seize a moment. Instead, it is enhanced production from some of the greatest manufacturers in the world. So while I don't necessarily see that we're going to keep the numbers at that same historic high, I don't see a collapse, and I don't see demand lessening so that there's a tremendous amount of unpurchased inventory. And speaking to the idea that Reinhard spoke, hopefully not into existence, when he said retailers looked around and said, oh my God, we've got too much inventory. When it comes to the greatest cigars that are out there on the market right now, there's not enough of them. There's not enough Padron. There's not enough Oliva. There's not enough Fuente. These guys are being judicious in how they're putting their product into the marketplace. And look, if American demand suddenly collapsed for any reason, and all of a sudden you had a volume that distributors owned of cigars that were perhaps sitting on their shelves too long, they could immediately look to other markets in the world and redirect it, because the effect of what's been happening in Cuba is only going to accentuate the demand for the greatest non-Cuban cigars in the world. And by the way, there is a nicer, a broader, more varied array of super premium products available for consumers today than there ever has been in the history of cigars. In other words, there are more people from more places making the absolute pinnacle of success in terms of flavor, construction, consistency for distribution to cigar lovers around the world. So that's for sure. Before I give it over to Jose, I want to say one other thing. The only way that this radical increase in prices for Cuban cigars and the resulting sales is going to affect the Cuban people is that jineteros, that the scamsters that exist selling counterfeits to unsuspecting people traveling to Cuba are going to be able to make much more money, because they're going to be able to charge much higher prices to the suckers that are arriving to say, oh, I got, you don't have to pay factory prices, come to me and I'll sell you these cigars. And they're going to get, 3 times the price for their fakes than they ever have before. And there are going to be more people who want to buy them because they know they're going to be able to sell them.
That is, George, that's a great point. I was going to bring it up.
I once bought a Rolex in New York, in Battery Park. It was $20, and the guy said, "I said, the guy, this is authentic." He said, "Yeah, authentic Rolex." I said, "Oh, what a bargain!" And I bought it. And,
well, but you forgot.
He knew it was fake, and I knew it was fake. So what's the problem? But I agree with you that counterfeiting is going to be the problem for Cohiba. For Cohiba, it's going to be a problem. Yeah.
But that money will be distributed across the island. In other words, there actually will be some benefit. That money will go. But I will say this: you probably ignored the little sign that the watch vendor in Central Park had that said it came with a New York warranty, 30 feet or 30 seconds, whichever comes first.
Listen, going to Reinhard's question. Look, we have to look at our times now of the boom of 96 and 97 and the boom of today. 96, 97 was a disaster because there were, George remembers what I said in the article, and the Cigar Aficionado said there were cigars that were not worth 50 cents that were sold at $10. You know how many people stopped smoking because the cigars in 97 basically were bad? So in 97, we had 418 million cigars were imported. 1998, it went down by 24%. The next year, it went down by 22%. So that means that 200 million cigars were imported less in the next 2 years. And that's where our good friend, Mark Goldman, what's the guy from JR, Lou Rothman. And those guys were sitting in the Gran Almirante in Santiago with bags of cash, buying them at 15 and 20 cents on the dollar. The
Which fueled which fueled their bargain hunting customers, humidors, for almost 20 or 30 months.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was
But that's it.
Two
But
plus
that's
years.
it. But in
But
the
what I-
meantime, Jose, what you'll agree with me is that the great cigar makers never stopped making top quality product and selling every one of those sticks.
Yes, and you know, it's something that Carlitos always said, and we got to go along with Padron. When did really Padron and Fuente really grow? It was after the boom of 96 and 97. Why? Because they did not ship any cigars that were not ready. We're going to this boom now. We hit 456 million cigars. But what people don't remember is that the boom of 96 and 97 was a USA boom. It was not a worldwide boom like we have today. So we're talking about 456 million cigars that were imported to the States. But how many cigars were imported all over the world? It was millions and millions and millions, and there is no way to quantify them, because you know how the companies are. They tell you, well, we made 30 million cigars. This went to the States, this went to South America, this went to Europe, this went to the Far East. But the boom, to me, in my personal opinion, and George can elaborate on this boom is bigger than the boom of 96 and 97. First of all, because it was worldwide, and second, because of the numbers. Now, the other thing out there, I'm going to disagree a little bit with George. We've had on our show a lot of media people, store owners. In the last year, a lot of people have said that they're seeing companies, and we never mention companies, cutting corners, cigars that are not drawing well, cigars that are canoeing, cigars that are tunneling, cigars with bad draw. What killed the boom of 97 was that every young person, or maybe a person in his 30s or 40s who started to smoke for the first time, paid $10, $12 for a cigar that was a piece of garbage. So now, thank God, 20 was pretty good, 21, I think, till about mid-year was pretty good, but already we're seeing companies cutting corners. The only thing that could bring down the industry again is if everybody starts to cut corners and people start to complain about cigars. Now, we know the companies, the Padrones of the world, and Pepin, and Perdomo, and Plasencia, and other companies, great companies out there, but there's a lot of people cutting corners. That's my 2 cents.
I've talked to many producers, and they think that this demand is not the same that it was in the 90s. I'm very young, Jose. You know, in the 90s, I was in the university, so I wasn't in tobacco world. But they think that this is not going to be the same. Maybe because it's true that people stand with quality before than with quantity. So everyone can find the cigar that satisfies him. So I think it's just making a positive view of all of this. I agree. I agree with George that this is going to be a big opportunity for more brands, more origins, to make good quality cigars, good prices. So for me, it's not the end of the world. It's only a different stage in which, of course, there's a super luxury segment of cigars that are far from for what I can afford. But I have my choices. I have cigars that the other day I think you see it, that I bought a couple of Opus X 20 anniversary, and it was 45 euros here in Spain, the price of the cigar. I think it's a luxury item, 45 euros for a stick, and of course it was fabulous smoke. I love it, but it's I think it's expensive too. I found it expensive, at least for me. It's expensive. So I think George is right that this is going to be an opportunity for people, and of course, an opportunity for consumers to find good quality cigars at a reasonable price. Not only cohibas for men.
Carl, you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to maybe extend just to the people that are much wiser than us here, but Jose made an excellent point from an era way before my time, but I mean, obviously that makes a lot of sense, right? If the prices keep going up and the quality doesn't increase, in fact, gets worse, right? I mean, obviously that's going to crash at some point. That obviously my mind immediately goes to the Cuban market, because as a Swede, I buy a lot of Cuban cigars. I love Cuban cigars, and I'm very critical of them right now. And we're seeing the prices increase so much. Do the people here think the quality control will increase, or will it be the same downfall as the boom? I mean, something needs to happen, right? Or is the point that George made that these people are investing and buying them as museum pieces, are they just never going to smoke them and never find out that they're crappy cigars? You know, what will the effect be? Because if you're buying a $300 Cohiba and it's not rolled properly, that's a ripoff, right? So I'm just, what are the thoughts on this? Because something needs to happen, right?
Well, I can tell you that it is highly unlikely that quality control in Cuba is going to increase. If anything, the pressure is, so I'll revisit, and this is something that I'm sure Jorge and Jose have been watching for years and years and years. Every February around the time of the festival, Cuba makes all these rosy projections about how great the harvest was, how good things are going, and how production is going to be up, and everything is great, because they've been told, by the way, you have to produce X. We need this much money out of your sector, and you better have this growth. And then come November, December is the woe is me. Well, there was this storm or this happened, and all the bullshit excuses get trotted out for why they didn't meet their goals and why they didn't export what they were supposed to, and why there were issues. No one's going to come along and go, oh, we need to leave more cigars on the benches in Cuba. We need to keep them here longer. We need to protect our position as the jewel of the luxury cigar world. Instead, they're going to say, crank these babies out, slap those bands on them, put them in these goddamn boxes, and get them on boats. They got to get out of here as fast as possible, because we need that. We need those pesos, right? So that's all there is to it. And these other, the outside investors are certainly not going to go, whoa, let's slow everything down. Let's tighten up quality control. No, they're going to say, anything you can do to get us more of these. And the other aspect, let's be clear, the effect of the control shifting to a group of non-tobacco people based in China is that the tilt of the world's inventory is going to move east, and that's going to be what drives the luxury. The East and the Middle East are what is going to drive the consumer patterns, and their response is that, you know, they're just going to continue to compete to get all of the trophy brands. So there isn't going to be any relief in that front, right? In other words, the power is going to go in that direction, and it's going to significantly diminish all of the traditional strongholds of distribution for great Habanos. You're going to see less and less inventory. They're going to care less and less about what you want to buy, or any complaints or criticisms you might have about quality control or reliability of the stream. And it's going to mean that all of those distributors and retailers are going to have to do something which 25 years ago would have been unthinkable. They're going to have to embrace non-Cuban production and catch up with the rest of the world about what really defines a great cigar in today's marketplace. Because, like it or not, you know, luxury standards and people's reputation aside, the fact is greatness is defined by consistency, originality. You've got to be able to deliver the goods. And if a Cuban cigar, if you buy a Cohiba, I don't care what market you're in, if you pay the market price for that Cohiba and it's an empty suit, you know, the cigar, you're just sitting there going, wow, what the hell is this? Then the next thing you're going to do is say, what else is there? And today, regardless of Jose's thoughts about how certain manufacturers are starting to give in to pressures to increase. So maybe they're cutting corners, maybe they're shipping things sooner than they should, maybe they're using some tobacco that they might normally have held onto a little bit longer. But for the most part, the great people who are going to answer the call and benefit from this stupid strategy on the part of Habano's partners is going to be the classic legacy great brands of cigar makers and the families of tobacco men that provide the raw material. Those people are all going to benefit. They're going to see their reputations skyrocket and grow, and people are going to have to confront the fact that paying $50 for an Opus X is a hell of a lot better than paying $250 for a Cohiba. And I say that as somebody who would love nothing better than to smoke a great Cohiba right now, but I can't tell you the last time I did.
100% agreed. I mean, like you said, I mean, the new Edición Limitada 2021 Cohiba is a $300 cigar, and what Habanos promises is 2-year aged tobacco. I mean, if you talk about the industry standard, that's a joke, right? For that price point, that's not serious.
Davidoff Blanco has tobacco 25 years old in a bale. 25 years old in a bale. That's
and Javier, and just to add to that, I mean, remember that the shareholder has absolutely nothing to do with Tabacuba, right? I mean, Tabacuba is still, Habanos is just a marketing and distribution company, so they sell whatever they get from Tabacuba, and the next fight you're going to see is that Tabacuba may be asking Habanos and the shareholder for, you know, north of $100 million to do what they think they need to do to improve, you know, production and all the things they need to do on the agri and the pre-industrial processing. And that's whether the shareholder is going to have the appetite to shell another 100 to 150 million bucks to the Cuban government. That remains to be seen.
You know, that is a very good point, because, you know, people, yeah, you know, a lot of people hear Habanos, but people forget Cuba Tobacco, because, you know, the distributors of Habano, they have 49%, but at the end of the day, it's the Cubans who decide what's going to be shipped.
Right.
And we all know that there's a great market there.
In the factories. What's going to be made in the factories and lined up in the warehouses ready for export?
Exactly. And George, I know you used to go to, I know you haven't been in Cuba for years, but I know you used to go there a lot. I know you still have contacts there. And I still have, I'm not going to get into details why, but there's a lot of things going down there. There's even rumors of a parallel gray market, that a lot of stuff that was, you know, a lot of people went to jail, remember? And a lot of people here know some people that we knew went to jail, totally unjustified, because of some corruption that was going on. And somebody had to be blamed when the English came in, when they sold out the deal to Imperial. But that's old history. But at the end of the day, the problems that Cuba have with boxes, with fertilizer, with the amount of people that had, let's say, 50 manzanas, and all of a sudden they said to the government, no, we're only doing 40 manzanas. Why? Because we need bananas, we need rice, we need corn, we need beans, we need this. Because the situation in Cuba is not only how hard it went through COVID, it's a problem. They're importing sugar. They have to import coffee from Vietnam. When they put together the exchange peso, that it was 24 to 1, Last week, I had a friend who went. It's 120 to 1. That divisa is not going to their central bank. Why? Because a lot of things in Cuba now is being dollarized, and that's what's happening. So forget it. The rollers ain't going to get shit. The Cuban people ain't going to get shit. The Hong Kong group are going to get more money. And I would not be surprised that in Cuba Tobacco, seeing the prices that the distribution side wants for these cigars, they're going to say, you know what? We want a piece of the pie too. So we will see in time what will happen.
Yep.
Piggybacking on all that, Jorge, I have a brief question regarding to your perspective, what this is going to mean on the international floor. Because on the one hand, you know, in the US, manufacturers are having a hard time to keep up with the demand purely in the US. And for a long time, some of the legacy brands haven't even shipped products into Europe and some of the international markets. Yet at the same time, Europe and some of the established Eastern Hemisphere areas have substantially dried up in terms of Cuban supply. How do you see this unfold on the midterm perspective as to, you know, what are people gonna base their purchasing decisions on, and what will they yearn for?
You're talking about New World brands, yeah?
Well, both, you know, because it's sort of a two-way communication and a two-way situation and problem here, where it's a supply and demand for both Cubans and Cubans.
I mean, I can speak for Hong Kong, which, you know, 5 years ago, you know, you were hard pressed to find any New World brands in Hong Kong, right? And that's changing very, very quickly. I mean, brands like you know, Fuente and Oliva, and I'm smoking Steve Saka cigars in Hong Kong now. I mean, and there's Joya de Nicaragua has done a great job in entering the Asian market. So yeah, if they have the capacity to do it, and I've spoken with Cesar from Padron many times, that, you know, they can't at the moment, but if they did, you would see, I think you would see a huge demand, especially in Asia, for New World cigars, right? But I think it's not an issue of demand. At that point, it's going to be an issue of supply. Are any of these companies willing to send 30, 40% of their production to Asia when they're already, you know, back order in the US? But yeah, I think Asia and in Hong Kong, I can tell you that the New World cigars are exploding. And even PCC is looking at selling a lot more New World cigars because they see the writing on the wall. So it's happening whether we want it or not. The question is whether New World producers will be able to satisfy that demand going forward. I don't know.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned PCC because they approach our distributor there too. Because look, the reality is the world has changed. If we go to wine, if you didn't drink French wine, you were not drinking wine. But guess what? How many times every year they have those contests? California is beating the hell out of that. New Zealand, great wines. South Africa, great wines. Spain, Italy. The world has changed. Spain too. But also somebody mentioned social media. Guys, let me tell you something. Not because I'm on social media a lot, but I can tell you social media has changed every industry. But if there's an industry where it's had really a huge, huge impact, has been in our industry, the cigar industry. And what a lot of people don't get is it's not about the amount of things you post. I see people post all day long and they get 3 likes, 5 likes, maybe 2 likes, maybe one from the mother and the wife if she's not happy. And that's it. It's not about the amount of what you post. It has to have content. It has to be well, and it has to be something also that's going to, let's say, communicate something about that brand, about that person, and about an event. But the people who are doing it well have really gained a lot of awareness for their brands and even for themselves. So social media has had a huge impact. Look, I don't want to say this because I'm friends and I kind of like Reinhardt, not a lot, but I kind of like him. But just look at what Light 'Em Up has done in the last 2 years. Nobody knew Reinhardt. And look what he has accomplished. He's honest, he's serious, He does his homework. He has become a household name for the cigar people in the industry because of what he does. And also Coop, and also Dave Garofalo, and Bear, and so many people out there that have contributed to really making life. Look at my young guys, friends, Carl and Ruben from Stogie Lads. The kids are 22, 23 years old. They got fucking 20,000 followers. I know people been in the industry for years and years, don't have 7 followers. Why? Because of what they write, their content. So it's a lot of things you have to put in together to really bring it out. But in my opinion, social media has had a huge, huge impact in brands and also in the personalities of a lot of people. My 2 cents.
Yeah, and Reinhard, let me just, if I could add, I mean, and this is maybe a question for Jose as well. Do you foresee, I mean, and this could be something that could change the picture as far as New World cigars. Do you see, outside of maybe Opus X, any other New World cigar brands or manufacturers that could turn into an investment vehicle like we've seen with Cuban cigars, where, you know, buying a certain cigar it's an investment for the next 10, 20 years. And I know that Opus has done some of that, and there's a little bit of a secondary market where they go for much more if they're 10, 20-year-old Opus X, right? So are there any other brands that could develop into that, where those brands could turn into a pure investment vehicle like we've seen with Habanos in Asia? What do you think?
I'm going to take the fifth on that one. I'm going to leave George Brightman to answer that one.
Oh, thanks, Jose. Jumping into the hot seat.
In any case, if the guys that have bought Habanos, this investor group, has bought the company thinking in a short-term profit, they didn't do a good job, because cigars, tobacco is not about short-term. It's always about long-term, and of course there will be profit, but not in the short term. So maybe it's true that they are not people from tobacco. It's true they are from out of the industry. They are only investors. They could buy. They have bought cigars, but they could have bought, I don't know, cars or watches or whatever, and they don't mind. But I think that they should have any information about what they're buying, because it was not a little money. It was quite a lot of money to invest. They should have some information about what they were buying. But of course, if they are waiting for a short-term profit, they are wrong. This is not how it works. I think I've seen in my career in tobacco, that is for not so long than Jose, but for more than 20 years working in tobacco as journalist. I've seen a lot of brands, new brands appearing, like very expensive, very luxury, and crash because you should have more than a very big price to have a brand awareness. I think some balance between the price and quality, and what is very important, and I agree with Jose with this, now with social media, the opinion of people, you can see the opinion very close, and that is very important in the decision of purchasing one cigar or another. What you have seen in the social media, what has Carl said, or what has anyone said with a lot of followers and people with prestige in the social media talking about cigars. So maybe they I don't know, they should have information about what they buy it.
If I may add real quickly, Reinhard, to answer your question from a moment ago, and by the way, another Blanco now speaking up, as if we didn't have a shortage of Blancos on the screen.
Great to see you, David.
Great to see you, Reinhard. The question you posed about where do you see New World cigars filling possibly the void, as it were, I think you were alluding to with the driving of the Eastern and the Middle East for the luxury good. determining buying power and determining where sales go for, particularly the Habanos, is that this opportunity for non-Cuban or New World cigars has the opportunity to expand. But we also, to some extent, face the same problem of growth that the Habanos company faces, or should I say, Cuba Tabaco, with making more product, being able to hold on to that tobacco, as Jose mentioned, to be able to fulfill the need and the desire for the increased amount of product, which we are facing right now. As some of you are aware that we've had a banner year of importation into the United States from particularly places like Nicaragua, where our family has manufactured. So we will be able to ramp up and fill that void for more economical, luxury, premium cigars. But it will also take time for us because, as other people have mentioned here, even we have had back orders in the United States, which is our primary markets for New World cigars, consumption anyway. We are making headway into the European market as a community of New World cigars, but it is going to take time. So there is going to be a struggle, I think, for non-Cuban or New World cigars, as well as the Cuban product, and then be available into those European markets. Because I agree that I think that the Far East and the Middle East will suck a lot of that availability of tobacco out of the Habanos in particular. I don't think there's any doubt or anybody here would disagree with that. But I think we'll be okay. We'll be better positioned as New World cigar brands and companies and families to be able to fill that void. It's just going to take time, especially with the demand we have here in the States at the moment. So just wanted to add that.
Excellent point, David. Many thanks for.
Reinhardt, could you let George Brightman answer Jorge Tapia's question? I think it's interesting.
With Reinhardt's permission, I will give you a couple thoughts about that.
Please.
So, in a way, what I'm going to say dovetails with what David was just saying about the capacity to take the time to grow into meeting this increased demand in other markets. But there is no company aside from Davidoff, besides the Fuentes, that has achieved a global market awareness of the superiority of their offering. Now, I'm not talking about what American consumers might say about looking at an array of vendors' products. But around the world, in terms of looking at a cigar as a luxury product, there are two companies that stand toe-to-toe with Cuba, and that's Davidoff and their operations and the Fuentes, and some of the brands that the Fuentes have made for other people. I do believe that there are a number of companies that can continue on their present arc and grow their reputation in terms of their viability as the cigar that you should be buying with an idea towards flipping. Let me just tell you this: the La Palina cigars that were made by Maria Sierra in El Tito de Moros in Miami, those cigars could easily, if there were enough of them around at this point for anybody, they could easily be sold for 2 or 3 times the price that they were purchased on release from La Palina. I think that there are cigars that Ernesto has made in the last 5, 6, 7 years that if there were inventory lurking in people's humidors, that could easily be brought out in 3, 4, 5 years and sold for 3 or 4 times the original selling price, which was a bargain in the first place, by the way. But the problem with looking at another company's portfolio as a hedge to match what Fuente Opus X might represent, or what older Habanos inventory might offer, is that they don't enjoy the same global reputation. So there has to be some time, the stew has to sit on the back of the stove for a little bit longer to let that develop and have markets outside of the North American market go, holy cow, this cigar is absolutely the equal of these things that we have been paying 10 times the price for. But that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, honestly, it was really 20 years past the judgment in Paris, the famous contest that proved that California wines from the US belonged on the same stage as the greatest French wines. Just to give you an example, for them to reach cult status where people were competing to buy them on release from the factory, laying them down and getting 5, 6, 7 times the value for them in less than a decade. So yeah, we have a number of players in the cigar world, in the non-Cuban cigar world that could grow to fill that kind of collector's portfolio demand, but the social media world is going to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of creating global brand recognition for those other portfolios of product. But believe me, the search is on. People are going to be out there asking. Carl's question is he may be doing it from a point of view of as much as a consumer and a smoker as he is from a businessman's point of view. But there are plenty of people out there right now that are going, what can I buy that will fulfill that status? And by the way, the smart ones are doing it from the point of view of what can I have in my humidor 5 or 6 years from now that will give me as much satisfaction as in the old days a 5 or 6 year old Cuban would have granted at a reasonably affordable price, as opposed to saying, what can I put down right now that I can flip for a 5-time markup in less than a decade?
And that is exactly the point, George. And I think that's the positive and very interesting outlook for the near future, and what we will closely follow and monitor
Right
via
here,
Light 'em Up
discussions
and
like this.
On many more inspiring conversations. We'll wrap things up for today, and I want to thank all of you for such an insightful and inspired discussion and conversation. I want to particularly thank all the participants and the people here on the panel: George Brightman, Javier, Jorge Tapies, Jose Blanco, Carl from Stogilets, Sig, who had to leave us already, but what a wonderful discussion and conversation it has been. Thank you all so much. Please stay with us. Please continue this wonderful conversation on social media, on all our channels. And I hope to see all of you again next week for another inspiring Light 'em Up show. But it's been a wonderful pleasure and privilege to host you all today. So many, many thanks for being here with us.
Reinhard, one last thing. We have to do part 2 of this.
Most certainly.
We have to do part 2 of this right after PCA, because a lot of things were left out. Plus, it will give us the month of what's left of May, June, July to get some feedback, to be what the reaction of the markets are.
You have my word. We will do that. We will do a end of the quarter show, and we'll discuss things yet again and see how it evolves. Most certainly. Thank you all for today. And as always, light them up, and we'll see you again super soon. Many thanks. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody.